Welcome back to The Real Story. Today's last topic brings us to a significant development in Florida. That's where 5 Proud Boys leaders, including former chairman Enrique Tarrio, have filed a $100 million lawsuit against the Department of Justice pertaining to their January 6th prosecutions, and that was on Friday. 4 of those plaintiffs were convicted of seditious conspiracy. However, shortly after taking office, President Trump commuted their sentences and pardoned Tarrio, who himself was sentenced to 22 years in prison. Now they filed a lawsuit against the U.S. government in a federal court in Orlando, alleging very serious constitutional violations, including arrests without probable cause, fabricated evidence, and prolonged pretrial detention under extremely harsh conditions, such as solitary confinement. They also claim the Biden administration targeted them for their political alignment with President Trump. In essence, they believe it was a politically motivated abuse of power. Tarrio also further clarified the reasoning behind this legal action outside of the White House on Friday.
The Biden administration and its ruthless campaign to rob us of our liberties and terrorize our families. We will not stand idly by while our rights are trampled. On November 5th, 2024, the American people removed the boot of tyranny from our necks by electing a president who upholds the rule of law and Constitution. President Trump kept his promise, releasing us on day 1, ending our time as hostages of a lawless regime. He appointed Pam Bondi as the Attorney General to restore faith in our justice system. Today, we call on her to honor her commitment to the American people, to right the wrongs of her predecessor, and to hold accountable those who violated our rights. We trust President Trump's judgment. He doesn't make mistakes.
Interesting. Very interesting. And of course, we all make mistakes. But the main point there is very clear. Now, how things will ultimately shake out is also unclear. But the very fact that this lawsuit has been filed at all indicates a significant change in both the legal and political atmosphere in this country since Trump took office. And here with the reaction is Davis Younts, a military defense attorney for Younts Law. Davis, thank you for being here.
Always an honor, Riley.
So, I have a lot of questions. Let's start with this one. Do these plaintiffs have a legitimate case?
Listen, I think they do, and that's absolutely critical. And I think it could shed a lot of light on why they brought this case in the first place. So the question is, can they survive some sort of a motion to dismiss this case? And it really will come down to a question of whether or not they can show constitutional violations occurred at the direction of federal employees. So federal prosecutors have given, the federal government gives itself immunity. We hear terms like sovereign immunity, and federal prosecutors have tremendous discretion and almost absolute immunity, and FBI agents have similar immunity. So that's the challenge for these plaintiffs in these cases. But there's no question there were serious concerns with the deprivation of basic constitutional rights and liberties in this case. Not only is there a concern about the way these people were charged, who was targeted. It appears there are a whole lot of political reasons to charge these individuals to support a narrative. And if you can survive that, then you look at how were they treated. Many people were kept in just unheard of conditions in the United States. They were kept in solitary confinement for no reason other than political targeting, or that they would say things publicly, or they would have access to information that would allow them to support their case. So if this case can survive that initial motion to dismiss, then things could get very, very interesting, because you would go into the discovery process and you would get access to information about potentially intentional acts to hide, destroy, or obscure evidence in these cases. And that's when you get into, I think, ideas that would support large settlements, as well as potentially getting a finding of malicious prosecution. So I think what's key to watch here is, will the Department of Justice defend this case? Will they seek to settle it early, or will it survive a motion to dismiss and actually get into the discovery phase? And that's where things could get very, very interesting.
Where things also get interesting for me, Davis, is the point about political motivations. How do you go about proving that there was some sort of political intent behind the actions of these federal officials?
Well, I think what you show is a double standard. And I think that's the approach that they should take in this case. You can show malicious prosecution if you can show that similarly situated people in similar circumstances were not targeted and were not prosecuted, and the only differentiation, or the primary differentiation, is the political motivation behind it. Okay. And so when we look at the actions during the Biden administration under Biden's Department of Justice, we look at the actions of illegal immigrants as well as Antifa and other rioters, and these people were not targeted for seditious conspiracy. They were not targeted for the actions that they did and the havoc that they caused in so many cities across this country. There was the DOJ essentially letting people go. Presidential candidate Kamala Harris was accused of helping to fundraise for some of these people that were engaged in riots and damaging police departments and other things. So there absolutely has been a double standard. There was clearly a double standard in Biden's DOJ, and I think that's the focus. If you can show there was a double standard, then you can get past that initial hurdle and start asking questions like, okay, what was the actual motivation?
Okay, so there's a lot of hypotheticals and ifs here, Davis, but this could be, theoretically, one of the most significant cases in modern American history. So I'm going to be following this very closely. But while you're here as well, I have to ask about another point pertaining to January 6th, the pipe bomb investigation. We still don't know exactly what happened there, but for everyone who remembers, pipe bombs were found outside of the DNC and the RNC. Very mysteriously, and it's still unexplained to this day, all these years later. But now Deputy Director of the FBI, Dan Bongino, says they're going to look into that. I'm wondering if you think, or what you're really thinking about that, because to me that seems like a very weird question to not have answered. And the fact that the mainstream media doesn't seem to be curious whatsoever about that story or the investigation is also very suspicious to me.
Yeah, it defies logic and credibility to think that the placement of those pipe bombs, a very specific type of weapon, a very specific type of explosive device, those are not all that easy to make. It takes a particular skill set to place them there. They were placed in interesting locations when you try to do this. And there's video, right? We have video of people in that area, of them leaving the scene and things like that. So video cameras are everywhere there. So there's so many questions. And again, I think that's why this case is so important. I don't care what you think about the Proud Boys. I don't care what you think about anything else. But I think there would be tremendous value in letting this case go forward to the discovery process, because we might actually get some real answers about the pipe bombers, about the agents that were involved in inciting the crowds on January 6th, and how this narrative was created.
But to your point as well, so we want answers, but also we want accountability. I mean, $100 million is a lot of money, but let's just say there was an abuse of power here. Do you really think that that would constitute justice for these plaintiffs?
No, and I don't think the monetary damages are the point. I think what really is the point is if they get to discovery and can show that federal prosecutors or FBI agents were destroying evidence, hiding evidence, or were actually politically motivated. And we've seen it. I mean, we've seen FBI chats about political motivation in many investigations under the Biden administration. That's where accountability could come in. I mean, some of these people have left, but many of these people we can assume are still entrenched in the federal government bureaucracy. They're still living in the swamp. And so, again, my biggest hope for this case, and we can follow it closely together, but my biggest hope is we get to a discovery phase where we actually get answers to some of these questions.
Okay. I am right there with you, Davis, and thank you, by the way, for talking about this. I'm very excited to see what happens moving forward, and I really do appreciate your insight into some of these really big questions about it.
Thank you, Riley.
Left to men like Davis, Younts fight for these Navy SEALs. Davis Younts, you are an attorney who has successfully defended naval officers.
Davis Younts has been instrumental in defending
Davis Younts successfully defended an evangelical Navy lieutenant